Today we are talking about synchronicity. Synchronicity is not just some random occurrence, magical and exciting and kind of make us feel or get a sense of the more that exists for us as humans. We are connected to something much more. Synchronicity is a practice that we can actively be engaged in. Once we start to understand truly that we are creator beings and what that really means. Synchronicity is something that is going to be a way of life for us as we move into the future, as we truly do begin to live more from the bigger part of who we are. Can you share with us what, from your perspective, synchronicity is?
So for me, my awakening journey involved a profound experience of synchronicity. Really, I would say that my life is much more guided by synchronicity. Sometimes, the synchronicity is leading us through two challenging times.
But last thing I'll just say exactly is that everything is energy, and it is just this kind of like matching of energy. If we put something out, like it is the law of physics or quantum reality or quantum physics, that it's a vibrational matches. We can create our reality in that way. Welcome back to the Awakening Conversations podcast. My name is Kate. I'm here with my co-host Amanda. And today we are talking about synchronicity. This is something we've mentioned several times in the 20-something episodes that we've recorded to date. And we want to explore it in more detail because synchronicity is not just some random occurrence and not just these kind of out of the blue experiences that we have that seem magical and exciting and kind of make us feel or get a sense of the more that exists for us as humans, and is a kind of glimpse into the fact that we are spiritual beings and that we are connected to something much more. We really believe that synchronicity is a practice that we can actively be engaged in once we start to understand truly that we are creator beings and what that really means. And synchronicity is that. It is us being able to influence the experience of our life, shape our own reality when we really have a handle on how it works, why it happens, and the fact that we are so much more powerful than we truly understand from our limited human perspective. Synchronicity, we really believe, is something that is going to be a way of life for us as we move into the future, as we truly do begin to live more from the bigger part of who we are, this consciousness part of who we are, and really understand how we are connected to everything and everyone. There is no sort of, separation of what is inside of us and outside of us. And really our intentions and our direction of our focus and our awareness, I guess, can have a really powerful effect on what our life looks like. So Amanda, let's dive into explaining synchronicity. I know that this has been a big part of your awakening journey. And as you've said to me before, it really activated at the time that your awakening happened, the experience you had with your mum's passing. Can you share with us what, from your perspective, synchronicity is?
So from my perspective, from my experience, there's always messages, alignments, occurrences happening that are helping us along our journeys. And for much of my life, I was not aware that this existed, that this was happening. And so I was not looking for any signs or paying attention when something that felt like a coincidence happened. It wasn't, I just chalked it up to just being, that's random, versus acknowledging that there is grander scheme at play that is helping all of us along our soul life journeys. And so for me, my awakening journey involved a profound experience of synchronicity that opened my eyes to the fact that there's something more happening here. And this happened around the time of the death of my mom. And it's something that helped me through that process and that experience. And I think because it was so profound, it had allowed me to start beginning to look for more or to acknowledge when things happen. They were no longer just coincidences. And I was excited when I'd see them. And I think that energy allowed more to come in. And so really, I would say that my life is much more guided by synchronicity. I trust that synchronicity is always happening. And sometimes I might feel blocked or like question whether there's some greater reason for why things are happening. But I do believe that we can actively work with synchronicities and co-create. Like, I feel we can do things to facilitate more synchronicities happening. And really, we can make big life decisions from these synchronistic experiences. And I think they are more responsible for our life path than we might care to acknowledge. It's like, I was just thinking today about just making a list of synchronicities that I can think of that were profound. And, I met my husband on a park bench, and I look back and I had no idea about synchronicity at the time, but it felt very like, looking back, it was all very orchestrated and guided and aligned, just how the whole thing happened. And so, yeah, it's something that if we want to work with it, I think we're going to talk today about ways that we can open ourselves up to more of that. And so, yeah, I think that sums up my introduction of synchronicity, and anything that you want to, from your experience, or that you'd like to add to that topic question.
I want to say, first of all, that when you said, you looked back and meeting your husband was a synchronistic event, when I wrote my list, I was like, actually, meeting Ricky was pretty, in that realm.
Yes.
And we can share those stories a little bit later. But I think for me, I've come to this topic of synchronicity thinking that they haven't really happened to me. And then as we talked about having this episode today, I've done a little bit of research into Carl Jung's 5 types of synchronicity, which we'll share in a second, which was like, oh, okay, I can see where they have happened. And I think for many of us, we very well maybe having them, but just we haven't got like this definition for us to put it in a category of, oh, that's what it is. And so I think really what I'm coming to understand is synchronicity feels like magic. It feels like magic, right? It's a way that life is, like you had this great example before we started recording of the Hunger Games and someone sort of orchestrating, like sending in something to where they're playing the games and whatnot. And I got this visual of my life as, I'm walking down a street and, just imagine we're walking down a street and there's lots of shops, but we can be completely oblivious to what's inside those shop windows. And yet the universe, life, is responding to us always. And in that shop window might be something that if we were paying attention is like insight, information, direction, confirmation for things that we are experiencing. And why that happens is because we are consciousness, right? We're a human. But what animates us, what makes us alive, is this consciousness part of who we are. And so when we have a certain like message or signal we're sending out from that consciousness, and everything else around us responds to that. And so therefore that's how those messages, signs, synchronicities come in, is because it's a match for where we are. And if we're on that personal growth journey or just really looking to move ahead in our lives, there's an energy we're holding for that, which means that everything externally, the energy around us, the consciousness around us, although it's all one, but for the sake of us understanding this, you give off an energy, life matches that. And this is the way that we can interpret all of that information. And then, as you said exactly, once we get our heads around that, be this co-creator where we intentionally set that information within our field so that the outside reality can match that. And we'll get into that in a second. But yeah, I think it's just magical. And I'm excited about it because I was like, oh, synchronicity, yeah, it just doesn't happen to me. It happens to Amanda. And then today I was like, oh wait, it has. And oh wait, I think I want to like explore this some more. So hopefully what we're going to share today helps others feel that excitement too, but also start to recognize how life is really already doing this for them, so that you can truly just connect with the magic that this concept is, and also just what life is, and the power that you do have to kind of shape your reality by playing with synchronicity. So
yeah, and just in your acknowledgement of that, you are going to start experiencing even more or you're going to start seeing and experiencing them more, recognizing them more, because you are now, you hold the belief that they do happen to you, and therefore you will be, it's like almost like you've opened up your little synchronicity radar to then allow them to come in. So
yeah. I want to say something to that then, because that was one of the things that I wrote down I wanted to talk about in terms of, like, before we dive into the types, like, belief is a really big piece here. And I have mentioned before, even as I went in to do the Akashic records, to read the Akashic records, and even to channel. And I think also as we step into these spiritual paths, we are really taught through life that we need to see it to believe it, right? If we can't see it, it's not real. That's the science approach, right? But in this sort of instance, in this realm of life, when we talk about consciousness, we need to believe it to see it, right? It is, again, as I just described before, if we're walking down the street and I'm holding energetically, it's not true. That is an energy signal I'm sending out. And so anything that I get in my outside world is kind of like a match for that. I'm not going to see the proof of. Whereas if I hold in me an energetic of this is real, that's when I'm going to notice it. And it's, it can be a challenge for the mind. And I might have said this before, like morally, you don't want to believe in things that aren't true, right? You don't want to make stuff up. But this is an instance where these things we must hold, or at least open to the belief. And we are going to then be able to have the experiences that can confirm, what is really going on out there in a world that there isn't, we can't really see it until it happens to us.
Yes. Yeah. What popped in as you were saying that is that, the story of how, I don't know if you've heard this story, but apparently on the indigenous people in North America, when the ships were coming over, they saw them approaching the shore, but they had no frame of reference. They had no template for what those were, that they couldn't see them. Those huge ships, they couldn't see them coming in. And so, with that, how that relates is that if we don't hold a paradigm where something is possible, it's just kind of like we hold this container, and then anything that doesn't match that container, it just kind of bounces off of it. Can't get into our understanding. We don't let it in because that's hogwash. That's make believe. That's whatever words we have to describe it, to discount it. We don't want to feel silly like I'll say that for a long time, I felt uncomfortable talking about this sort of thing because I didn't want to seem like some woo-woo person. I come from even though my medical background is more alternative, it was still, you need to make sure science supports it. And so I was coming from that more 3D physical proof model. And so I had to unlearn a lot of that to begin opening myself up to allowing some of this in.
Yeah. And so the invitation for anyone listening, if that's, that's how we're going to really embrace synchronicity and how this really can be a powerful tool in our lives. So let's dive into, as I said, Carl Jung has been a pioneer in this realm, or is the one that coined the term synchronicity. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah. Carl Jung, who we spoke about in just the episode that we just released about the shadow and the collective unconscious. For those of you who aren't familiar, go ahead.
We can link it somewhere up here.
Yeah.
And he has identified 5 different types of synchronicity, which I think as you listen to these, you're going to start to notice, oh my goodness, that's happened to me. Because as I was researching these this morning, that's how it happened for me. I realized actually this has been part of my experience. So the first one that he has here is it's a warning or alert synchronicity. And these occur just before we face stressful or pivotal events, especially when significant events are on the horizon, decisions that could drastically alter our destiny. These synchronicities often serve as cautionary signals, guiding us away from potentially negative outcomes. So it aligns with the Hermetic principle of cause and effect. And they subtly but significantly can influence our decisions. And so the example that was given where I was watching this was kind of like someone saying, they're going to buy a house and they've chosen the house. I can't remember exactly the details of the example, but they are on the way to make the payment for the house. But as they leave their own house, they hit traffic. They get through that traffic, but then they're derailed by some other traffic accident. And there's a series of events that happen that mean that when they get to the house they're going to buy, make the payment or whatever, they see, their example was police at the house next door. And they find out that actually the neighbors were really challenging neighbors to have that used to cause a lot of problem for other neighbors in the neighborhood. And so this is an opportunity for you to see that actually buying this house is not something that you want to do. So that was the example that was given there of how little things are coming in to kind of divert your path ever so slightly in subtle ways for you to then kind of have this bigger realization that this is not a decision that I'd like to make. Do you have any examples of warning or alert synchronicity that you can think of in your life?
Well, I guess what popped into my head as you were talking is that whether say they go through with buying the house or not, that can still be used as an experience to train our intuition and our relationship with synchronicity, because we can look back and we can see how did we feel? How did we respond to those experiences? Did we just ignore them? Did we just not give them think they were connected at all to this big event, this big life change that we are going to make? And then especially if you move into the house and you have these issues, one thing after another, and you're like, okay, I see that the universe, God, whoever was sending me signs that reconsider. And so we can work with that still, because we can think back to how we felt. We can think back to maybe what we weren't feeling. And we can start to, when we have those experiences, when we're leading up to a big event, we can start to pay attention. Is it just green lights? Everything's running smoothly. That's trusting that if that's happening, that it's a good path for us. And if the opposite is true, question and start to maybe ask for more signs and maybe slow down whatever big change you are starting to make.
Yeah.
I'll just say, I think, well, no, you go ahead. I don't really have a good example of this one for myself.
Yeah, I'll say an example that I can think of is, in the last 7 years here in Japan, we've had to make lots of decisions. It's a condensed time of my life where lots of decisions had to be made and moving in lots of different directions at the same time and exploring different ways to get things to happen. And whenever there was us sort of heading off in what I felt like the wrong direction, there was a very strong sense that things were pushing back on us. Ricky always describes it as the door shut, but, you might be pushing your hands on it going, no, I want this to happen. I want this to happen. And yet you're kind of coming up all of these stumbling blocks and it just felt like push back. You can't make something happen. There's catch-22 in that, you never give up and you're on the things you want to create. But again, it's a discernment around, is this just the signal that, okay, maybe let me step back and take a broader perspective. Is there a different way I can do this? Is there another avenue? And again, like you said, show me the signs of what direction to point myself, what other opportunities are there? Because I think in life, sometimes when we want to make changes, we get a very narrow vision about this is how it's got to happen. And we can barrel forward and ignore information that's telling us this is probably, there's a better way, or there's a different way, or this isn't the right way, or turn left instead of keep trying to barrel forward on a path that isn't the path to go ahead on. So I think it's subtle ways, and for us, it's just felt like, no, the door's shut. Okay. And then step back and be like, all right, well, if that's sharp, what else is here? So I'd give that as an example of that one.
Yeah, I'll just say that the other topic that we were considering using for today was about being tested, and like, how do you discern, or how do you tell the difference between, sometimes we have to be tested. Do you really want this? And so some obstacles are put in front of us to show the universe that we really want something. And so the obstacles aren't always a no, so I think that comes with the cultivation of discernment. And sometimes it means barreling through and making that choice and, seeing what the outcome is. And that tells you, like I said, what those signs actually were. Maybe we got through it and everything, it became the best choice in that, and that experience of persevering was important for your own personal growth and your journey. So that only comes through, I think that comes through experience and time, and you start to learn and asking. I think you can ask questions, right? You can, and we'll talk about like cultivating this experience of speaking with, putting your questions out there and asking for signs, and that's a way you can work with it.
And I just say, like, again, for this example, it's such a trusting of your intuition as well, right? Like, that, is there a deeper knowing of, do I continue to barrel, or is this a no, right? Like, we have those internal barometers too, which it's another fine tuning of our inner read on things as well that can help us really work with the synchronicity. So, all right, the second one that he has coined is confirmation synchronicity, often accompanying my notes, crucial and significant moments for our spiritual growth and personal transformation. So unlike warning or alert synchronicities, these confirm that we are on the right path or help us choose from the options available to us. They act as a compass that guides us towards the growth and development of our entire being. These lead us to an existence in harmony with our authentic self. These synchronicities can act as confirmation that we have made the right choices, and this type can deeply impact us, creating wow moments filled with a sense of magic. They often carry a personal significance that only we can truly understand. And so the example they gave in this particular thing that I watched was that, we have that passion, this burning desire inside to create something, do something, move somewhere. And perhaps we don't do that for a very long time because of the fears. But then at some point we're like, okay, I can't ignore this anymore, and I'm going to face these fears and all the doubts that I have. And then as we make those steps forward and we choose to act on that, there are signs and confirmations that come in. One of the examples they gave is that you're sitting in a cafe and you overhear a confirmation that kind of, there's several words that pop out that really confirm a choice you've made. Or they also said, like, you're sitting outside in a park and butterflies come along and dance around for you, but that has a significant meaning for you. So it's like signs and synchronicities that are confirmation of choices you're making and for you to move forward on the path that you're actively choosing to move forward on. That's really in alignment with the soul's path.
I'm going to share what I didn't think about this one until you mentioned the butterflies. So back in 2018, after my mom passed away, and I had just had a call with Vanessa, and it was my first call with her, actually. And back then she was acting more as like a psychic, and I was coming to her for a reading. And basically what she revealed to me was that she saw me as this digital nomad with my family living abroad. And there was this decision that I had been mulling over regarding like my kids' schools, and that I was going that route because that's what I thought was like the responsible route to go, like putting them in a older school, like integrating into the community, making roots. And she was like, no, you don't have roots. You're moving around. And so I got off this call and I was like so fired up, and I came outside to the backyard. John, my husband, was building a shed, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what she told me. And I was so animated and excited. And so hummingbirds were this connection with my mom. And this hummingbird, as we were talking, it flew over and it just hovered like right between us for like felt like a minute. It was just hovering right there, which had never happened before. And I'm looking at it, and as soon as I acknowledged it, it flew away. And to me, that was a confirmation, yes, to this. It was like this excitement that I was feeling. And it was this, like, I felt like it was my mom, like, yes, go do this. So that was a sign for me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. I mean, I think of an event that happened to me yesterday, and like, this is like a smaller version of that, but I used to do a lot of like videos for my business and, talk about things and put them on YouTube and send them out in emails. And it's been a really long time since I've done that. And I have been sitting on this video that I wanted to create for quite some time to kind of kick things off again in a new way that I'm working on for my business. And last week, with a call with Vanessa, she was like, hey, just write down the things you want to have some completion on. I'm feeling through a completion energy, and I've been struggling to get things completed. And for this week, it was just to get this video recorded. And so yesterday I put some makeup on. I was like, okay, that's going to make me do it. You put makeup on, you brushed your hair, make it happen. So I sat down and I was like, all right, I've got my, outline ideas in my head, and I'm going to just put a few things on paper, and then I'm going to record this thing. And so I did, and it took me like half an hour to get like the blooper roll out of the way of like, stop, start. What do I really want to say? Get into the flow. And it felt hard. And that's a contrasting experience to what it was like when I was doing these regularly. So I was like, and then I was like, it was shit, but I'm just going to leave it. It's done. And then we went outside to take the dog for a walk, and outside the dragonflies have hatched. And when the dragonflies hatch here, it is not like a couple of dragonflies hovering around in the garden. The sky is filled with them. And we walk around our tennis court, and they're like all lined up on the edges. They're all on the power lines. And I was just like, they weren't there this yesterday morning. They'd hatched some, or they've arrived. And I was like, you know what? They're such a symbol of change. And there wasn't just one, there was hundreds. And for me, I was like, that was a sign for me. I took that as a confirmation of like, you've taken that step to create that sort of change you wanted to make. And like, I knew that if I could just get this one out, then I can like kind of get the wheels going again. So, that to me felt like a really beautiful confirmation of, great on you for doing that. That was a step forward.
Yeah. So
you said the
dragonflies are the symbol of the number 55 gene key, right? Which is the transformation from victimization to freedom, which is the gene key of what we are currently going through on a collective level. So they're magical. So that's a really cool story.
Yeah.
And I just want to add that I feel like this type of synchronicity, it happens all the time in subtle ways. And so I think acknowledging them like you do, rather than dismissing it as like, oh, that's just what, they just hatched. There's no connection here, right? Or really like you were in the energy of this birthing process that you're in as well, this hatching process that you just went through, and the dragonflies were in it too, and you were both in this energy, and both emerged. And so yes, I think this one, it can happen all the time if we are willing to pay attention and acknowledge with all of them, but this one is especially, I feel.
Yeah. And I'll say that when I was watching this particular video about Carl Jung, he was even saying like, if for him, when things really happen in a significant way that was significant to him, he's like, I accept it. I don't brush it off. Like I accept that. When we do accept it, like there's a deepening of our connection to this realm, this phenomena, this way that we operate with the universe, life. So, it is, and it's a beautiful feeling. Like I held that space in my mind of like, oh, they probably just hatched, write it off. But in my heart, it felt much more important and, connected with it. And then I got to walk around outside with them and just connect with them. And like, it was beautiful. Put my hand out and try and get one to land on me.
Yeah. Well, what's cool is that I think that there is that feeling there. There is that little bit of high that I think comes. It's like this little acknowledgement that you're supported and you're held and you're not doing this journey of life by yourself.
Yes.
And it makes it so that I don't know, it helps us to keep going because, it can be hard. And so to recognize that, no, there's this magic that is supporting you. There's this magic that is, it's almost like a celebration for your accomplishment. Like, bring out the dragonflies, the game maker or whatever.
Yep. That's what it felt like.
Yeah, it's like, here's the party. This is your reward for doing the hard work. And and it's like, and for those listening, we started a mastermind group and we're celebrating our wins. And so it's like we forget to do the celebrations, and it's almost like nature is like, hey, we're with you in this process that you're on. And it's just so cool to think about.
Yeah, exactly. And it was a really beautiful confirmation for what felt like a lot of effort. Yeah. All right, let's dive into the third. Thank you. The third one is prophetic synchronicity. So these are signs, prophecies, and omens that are symbolic messages sent at significant moments. They can unexpectedly appear in your daily life, like the repetition of certain elements, such as repeating numbers that have personal significance to you. Also, dreams with a meaningful message for you at that time, or as a premonition of sorts. These synchronicities serve to confirm recent decisions or warn you about obstacles on your path. And they require our interpretation and observing of when they occur and the circumstances surrounding them. And that says to look for the patterns and record these to start to understand their significance in our lives. These synchronicities are a connection between our waking reality and the dream world, both of which are influenced by our consciousness.
So for that
anything
one,
up for you when I read that one?
Yeah. Well, I had an experience like that recently. A dream. I think I mentioned this on another episode. I can't recall, but basically I woke up like at 4:00 in the morning. Life was just feeling really hard. This I've mentioned in this past year, feeling just like life is a slog. I can't get ahead. And so this was a few months back, and I woke up at like 4 in the morning after having this dream, and it involved someone in my life, and they had a cocaine issue, and it felt real. And I woke up and I'm wondering, like, does this person really have an issue with cocaine? I'm like, no, I don't think they do. And then, but it like jolted me. It like woke something up inside of me, and I couldn't go back to sleep. And I got up and I just started working. And it's like, I've had this like motivation that I didn't have prior to that, this like fire under me of like, it was kind of this morning of like, kind of like downward spiral energy. And so, but interestingly, there was this YouTuber who there's this portion of the internet called LawTube, or these lawyers are on YouTube. And I've watched some of them in past years or so. And this particular LawTuber, that same night, he was arrested, or the next morning, he was arrested for cocaine. And it was like, it's previously like, morally, like I'm this moral person. But like his life took this like downhill turn. His wife was involved. They have like 5 kids. It's like kind of this sad, very sad story. But I found myself like paying attention because I'm interested in, I've always been interested in psychology, like why things happen to people, right? Like the human condition. And so I'm just like, paying attention, like, well, that's very interesting. They had this dream. The next day he was arrested. And then like a few days later, I started seeing these videos about like his case and his story. And just like, I hadn't known anything that was going on with this person, but it was like, he was on this like downward spiral. And it's like, obviously all this has to do with like our unhealed traumas and, as what happens to people if we don't address those things, like we can succumb to our shadow parts. And so for me, it was like, hey, like this is what a downward spiral, like pay attention to this downward spiral, because it's kind of like what can happen if we allow ourselves to go in like dark place, down like difficult places. And so that was, I've had a few dreams like that in my life where it was just like this different than other dreams, like pay attention. And so for me, that's kind of just like a jolting energy of like, what happens if we're just asleep and we're unconscious to our own patterns and we aren't moving and creating in the ways that we want to, especially as we get older, like we can go different directions. And so anyways, it was just like a message to pay attention a little bit more than I was, wake up a little bit.
I love that example. So let's go on to our fourth one, and it's manifesting synchronicity. So the experience of seeing or hearing something come to fruition after a thought or desire enters your mind, like thinking of a long lost friend and then connecting with them the next day, or needing something and then finding that while out and about. These are seemingly chance encounters, and it connects with the Hermetic principle that all is mind, meaning that our conscious and subconscious thoughts do not simply reflect reality, they mold and shape it, suggesting a more profound connection between our thoughts and reality. This is the law of attraction and the power of our focused intention. I know this is like...
Do you have one you want to share?
No, I was going to say, this is you in a nutshell, right?
Now, it's funny because one just happened yesterday and today, so I'll share that one. And this is not like well, I can say this is not a life-changing synchronicity, but actually even small synchronicity, seemingly small synchronicities can be life-changing because our lives are made up of all of these small moments and taking this turn instead of that turn. And so, I don't have to like put a lot of importance on it, but I acknowledged like this was very synchronistic. So yesterday I had a call with a prospective client. This person's a photographer. This person, one of the areas of their focus is with animal photography. And I mentioned to them, or this idea dropped in through our conversation. What about you connecting with pet portrait painters? And because they usually use photographs to work from to paint the portraits. And a lot of times people can't get a good image of their pet. So if you were to connect, if you had a relationship with someone who does pet portraiture and they could have someone come to them that, we don't have a good picture, go call her to take your pet portrait. So that came in, I shared that with her as just like an idea for her to connect, for her to grow her business. And so then today I'm at the dog park and I don't know, I was like feeding the dog some treats or something. And I look up and this woman who I've met multiple times, she's like, here. And I looked at him like, it's like, I do pet portraits. And she has a little card about her pet portraits. And I was like, well, that's really funny. And I told her and she's like, and she's in our realm of believes in our realm of possibility. And she's like, well, that's how it works out. Right. So, and then I passed it on to this person, but it was just like, I received it, I mentioned it, and then I didn't even go looking for the answer. It just was literally put in front of my face without me asking for it. And that's really how I think the manifestation happens, is through, I've wrote it down here in my notes. Yeah. I'll share it here. It says, so asking a question, getting clear on an intention or desire, and really being in a state. Well, in that instance, I wasn't intentionally like meditating or anything, but I've done it before where I'm meditating and I feel like myself opening up, and I ask, and I envision, I acknowledge something that I am interested to either to know about or to step into or receive, and then letting that go, detaching from how it's going to come into us. So releasing the attachment for how it will come in, and then being open to possibilities. And really it's being then having our awareness open for it to come in, for us to see it so we can acknowledge it. And so really those senses being open to how it wants to enter. And it can enter through just an idea popping into your head. It can happen by meeting someone that has the answer for you. It can be through an animal. It could be seeing something hearing something in a song, hearing something on the news, right? Like it can come in all different ways. And so really just having our awareness open can really allow for that to come in.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know I've had these. I can vaguely remember them, but I don't know the details of them. But, having had that desire to maybe more so not so much receive something, but want to know more about something. And then, a book comes in or I hear of a podcast or something. And it's that's not that so many degrees of separation is quite close that, okay, I'll head in that direction. And it feels really cool because it's it is ask and receive, okay, I want to have this experience. I've also, I don't think this is the same thing, but I've lost something and I was like, okay, can you please help me locate it? I know this thing is out there. I don't know where it is, but I know it still exists. And then, what it was this box that I have from high school of all the beautiful letters my best friends and I used to write each other. And I was sure my mum had it. And she's like, no, I don't have it, darling. I don't. And I'm like, you do? Can you have a look for it? Turns out it's in my brother's garage. He found it. And I was like, I just asked, can it please be found? And it was. And I was like, thank you. I knew it was out there. Can you help me just create this connection of path to find out where it is? And I truly believed it would happen. And I just waited. Yeah. I guess that's manifesting in a sense, is just manifesting the where is this thing?
Yeah. Asking for the question and it's like a seeking that we can turn on, and it can come through, we think that we have to go look online for the answers for things, but the answers can come to us. And that can be one mode of the answers coming through us. We can literally feel the desire, we can get the nudge to go look online and then, or sometimes I'll think about something and then I'll open YouTube and it's the first video it'll be the first video. Maybe it's someone who I've never even watched before. And it's here's the video that you need to watch and the answer. Yeah. And then sometimes a video will pop out at me. Sometimes, things pop out and I don't click on it, but it keeps on. It's in my feed again. Oh, it's in my feed again. Oh, it's still on my feed. Okay. If it's in my feed that many times, I better click on it. And usually when I do, I'm like, oh, I should have clicked on that the first time. That was the video that had the answer. Yeah. So it's they're patient with us. If we miss it, we don't have to be anxious. We don't have to be anxious about missing it the first time, but it's a lot easier if we are paying attention. So
yeah. And there's one other thing I can't remember. Again, my memory's not great for details, but I had either journaled and had this message come through for myself. And then I remember I opened Instagram and the first 3 posts, the exact line in 3 completely random people and pages I follow repeated the exact same thing. And then I can remember it was such a shock in that moment of that I put the phone down and I was like, okay, I got to do something with that. Can't remember what it was, the message, but 3. It was someone I knew, someone I didn't know, and a business. Just this exact same 3-word phrase or 5-word phrase that got repeated 3 times in a row. And I was like, okay, that's not nothing.
No, that's a confirmation, right? That's hey, pay attention here. There's keep going. And
it was a live one. Yeah.
Yeah. This is a cool thing that has always stuck with me. I don't know. It was probably 2016, I want to say. My son was a baby at the time and I was listening to Big Magic by, what's her name? Elizabeth Gilbert. And have you read that one?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a story about how it was a storytelling about how she receives her stories. And it was, I can't even begin to explain it in the verbiage that she used, but along the lines of it's this thing that drops into her and it's she has to sit down and she has to write. It's this tiger that if I might be messing this all up, but it's you have to grab it by its tail and you have to work with it. And if you don't, it leaves. And it basically, that story is going to find its way into someone else. And she has this story of how something that she didn't end up following through with, And then she met this other woman, this other writer, and she was writing that same story that she had received. So it's kind of like you and these other people are receiving the same messages, right? Like and it kind of goes along with that idea that we're these like vessels that the information, if we open, will flow through us. And the same information is flowing through a lot of us, because not all of us are going to act on whatever's coming through. And so I've had it before where it's like, I've had this idea and I don't act on it. And then, not long later, I see someone else doing it. I'm like, I had that idea, but I didn't do anything with it. So it's good that someone else is, right? Because it was an idea that came in that there was a need for, there's an energy behind. So
yeah, that's happened to me as well. Like I can think of, early in the days when I sort of was wanting to really start working in a coaching way with my awakening journey, and I had these real concepts burning inside me, and someone offered me like, take this, this challenge, this doctor's got this program. And it was like, he was just talking to me, he was speaking my inner world, and it just made me so angry that I wasn't saying the same, like wasn't speaking. And I really just received it as like, here's someone else like sharing their vision of or view of the same topics that you feel like you've really learned about. Like, here's the confirmation, like it can be spoken about, do it, and it did a really kind of lit a fire in me of like, gosh, like I can do this. And yeah, it was weird because I felt like he was speaking my own insides, and I was just,
Well, that's so cool, because it's like, it's other people too, right? Like when we're attracting these other people in, and they're giving us the confirmation, the messages that we need to do whatever it is that we're supposed to be doing, that our soul wants us to do. And so it's like, really, if someone's like, I've had this before where it can happen in a maybe not positive, what feels like not a positive way, where like someone's triggering us, it feels not good, but it's like they're actually in our awareness, in our consciousness. Maybe they keep popping up because there's something in us that needs to heal. And so that's synchronicity as well, as far as, or whether it's a person or it could be like a topic, or so there can be synchronicity in our healing journey, looking outside, in terms of showing us like, okay, now it's time to work on this. And like, this is where you are in your journey. And when you keep getting that message, it's like, oh, okay, it's time to do this work.
And this was triggering for me. It really was, because I was in my fear about the things I wanted to say and that I couldn't say them. People wouldn't understand me. So it was like, here's someone doing it and doing it successfully. Like, what are you worried about? So it was confrontational, but it was really, I needed to see it. And it came in my life like, now's the time, like you can do this. So yeah, that was a really good one. So our last type of synchronicity that Carl Jung has coined is opportunity synchronicity. Seemingly chance encounters arriving at the most opportune moment that transcend mere coincidence. They represent the perfect intersection of preparation and opportunity, acting as crucial elements that propel us forward on our destined path. These perfectly timed opportunities serve as lifelines, offering escape routes from challenging situations to exciting new chapters in our lives. They have a feeling of being preordained. The defining characteristic is the surge of joy and relief that washes over us when they happen. They resonate deeply with our intuition. They're devoid of friction or resistance, as if the universe itself aligns with the trajectory of our life's purpose, creating a state of effortless flow where everything fits smoothly. We hope you're enjoying today's episode of the Awakening Conversations podcast. And if you are, we'd love for you to hit subscribe. This helps us enormously to grow our channel and to get these conversations in front of more and more people. We really appreciate you being here and tuning in. So let's now return to today's episode. So I have a couple of examples here of this one. And this is where the meeting of my husband comes in. Because for me, there are multiple things kind of even led to this happening. That I lived in Darwin, which is at the top of Australia. I'm not from there. Most people that live there aren't from there. They move up there. And I was working as a radiographer, and it was Christmas time, and I had decided that I was going to work all of that period because it's, extra double time and a half over public holidays. I'm saving to go overseas. That was where I was headed. And So all of my friends had left. They'd gone back down south to visit family for Christmas, except for a couple other people still working. And so another couple had rented an apartment in a nice part of Darwin and said, well, when you finish work, come over and, have some dinner. And I can remember I finished work and I was like, should I go? Maybe I should just stay home. And I was like, all right, I'm just going to go. And I went to this party. And I was standing on the balcony of the party, and there were some people down in the apartment underneath having a party, and there's people sitting on the balcony. And there was Ricky. Who's that? I haven't seen that guy around before. But then I'm like, but I'm up here and he's down there. How am I ever going to meet this guy? And then his friend, who was quite drunk, yells up to our balcony, are there any single girls up there? I need to find someone for my friend Ricky. And I was like, I don't want to put my hand up. I'm like, oh, I'm single. So I was like, oh, damn it. Like, there's my missed opportunity again. But fortunately, my friend's like, oh, Katie's single, come upstairs. And so then I was like really embarrassed. But yeah, he came upstairs. We chatted. And then at some point, his friends had left, and, we continued to talk and we exchanged numbers and met the next day. And like, we've been together ever since that day. But it was literally a moment of just like paths crossed. He didn't want to go to the party that he was invited to. It just was like we ended up there. We were meant to meet in that moment. And, it was, I just knew it was meant to happen. One of those moments. And then I'll say the other type of opportunity synchronicity that happened was when we came to Japan, and for the very first time on a ski holiday. And my dad was the one who wanted to come here. We lived in Hungary at the time. He was in Australia. He used to come over to Europe every winter, and we'd go skiing in Austria because he had this newborn love for skiing after a Christmas visit that he came over for. And so he was like, no, we should go to Japan. I hear it's great for skiing. And I'm like, okay. So we planned this trip, and in the end, he couldn't come. And so I had some friends who came here all the time. So we're like, all right, we'll just come. We'll just go wherever you're going because I don't know where to go. We'll book the same town as you. Turns out that he had a couple of friends who came with him. They started a conversation with Ricky about, we want to buy a property here in Japan. And I mean, we didn't even have Japan on our radar. And so Ricky's like, oh, great, let's look at property while we're here, because he's always interested in that. This friend of his was like, well, maybe we should buy something together. So we started looking. We ended up finding the building that became the hotel that we ended up buying. And we'd seen it advertised on our website, but the guy wouldn't give us the details of where it was unless we paid him money. So we're like, we'll just find it. So we found it. And then we're like, okay, well, now what? So we can't really go in and see it because it's winter. It's covered in snow at the front door. How are we going to find out how to buy it? So our friend, or the guy that we were with, said, well, I know that the lady across the road here in this restaurant speaks English. Let's just have some lunch in there. We can ask her some questions. So we went inside, and this woman, who ended up becoming our good friend, spoke a little bit of English, and we were asking her about the building. And then we said to her, do you know any real estate agents? And she said, yeah, that man just there having his lunch. And this guy doesn't live in this tiny little snow town. He lives 40 minutes away. But there he was having his lunch on that day. And so he drove us around town, showed us all these properties for sale, and ended up being our real estate agent that, helped us buy this hotel. But even that, the friend who was like, yeah, I want to buy a property, we should go in. We went back another day to have a look we climbed in a window of this hotel and had a look. But we said to him in the car, like, okay, we're going to make an offer. Do you want in? And he literally just didn't answer the question. He just said nothing. And I was like, okay, well, we're going to go ahead with this. And if it happens, it happens. And then it did. It became this thing where how we bought it, the price just kept going down. We got it for a bargain. And then even when we got here, people just popped up, walked in the front door of the building and were like, oh, I have what you need, or you need this. And we felt so in flow with that. And then I'll just say that, yes, we were in flow. And yes, there was some crazy synchronicities that came together for that experience. And that experience then turned into some big challenges in our life and massive growth. So, our synchronicities aren't always just that they bring us the joyful parts of our life. This one was a synchronicity and a thing that had to culminate to happen because it was a transformational time we were entering, and we had to get to Japan. And we didn't know that. We had no plans to buy a hotel ever. no plans to move to Japan. That was not even on our radar. It just kind of happened. And then, here we are 8 years later.
Reflecting back, why do you feel Japan was important for your journey?
What we experienced here through the renovating of a hotel, the running of it, it was the catalyst. What that initial experience was the catalyst for my spiritual awakening. The events that followed that were instrumental in shaping how I really embodied what I learned through that awakening. And I believe that, Japan was the place that could hold us through that time, especially then as we entered into COVID, and it supported us to survive, I don't know, in some ways, but we were meant to be here, the nature, the people. Yeah. But I mean, it was the thing that cracked me open. For me, it was transformative for Ricky as well. And we learned a lot of things about life, business, each other, relationships through this process. It was like we felt like we just got this very jam-packed education, and like steep learning curve about all these things, because I feel like it's a preparation for something else that, kind of in the back burner, there's more that we're here to do as a couple. And that we've learned so much and so much preparation. And now there's sort of a door is open for, okay, well, what else? What's next? Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yes. I agree that especially the big life changes. It's like when we make a big life change, it is to grow into another version of ourselves. So for instance, we made the move we sold our house and most of our possessions, and we moved to Costa Rica, and that was the first 6 months were this like boot camp experience of a lot of dealing with a lot of stuff between John and myself, and conversations that needed to be had, healing that needed to be had. And so I see it as it was this preparation for what was to come. And that was 6 months prior to everything closing down in 2020. And I look back that if we stayed where we were, if we didn't have all those challenging experiences to go through and grow through, then I don't know, and we were still in the same location, I don't know if we would, feel like we would be in a much different place. So it was like we needed to be there, and we also needed to be in a space where we could do all this healing work, because for both of us, we started doing all this healing work, and both individually and together as a couple. And so sometimes, the synchronicity is leading us through two challenging times, but that's really because we have to go through these growth phases to let go of older versions of ourselves and to step in, like you mentioned, more the version of ourselves that our soul came here to be and what we came to do in this lifetime. We have to go through these challenging experiences that maybe we wouldn't choose. Maybe if we were just stuck in our same old path, maybe those lessons would come in much harder ways that we couldn't even, had we stayed in Oregon, for example. I feel like it wasn't set up for us to do this healing work there. And I feel like we had to leave. And so, it's taking the leap, like trusting and taking the leap. And then just, there's this trust that comes with the good, the bad, the, in quotation marks, good and bad, the challenging, the easy, the joyous, like all of it. It's like learning to accept it all and kind of riding the wave of this. But it does become much easier when we can start to look for signs to guide us when things get rough. And like, I feel like you hear a lot about people when they're kind of like at rock bottom, and then they reach out. Like a lot of people who are more religious, I would say, they like start asking like God, like I give up, I surrender. It's like when you surrender, it's like the responses start coming. Like that's like surrendering on a larger scale, but we can surrender to how things are going to work out on more in smaller ways, more subtle ways in our life to allow these things to come in. So they don't have to be such big, if we're doing this all the time, where we're always like open to where we're being guided, we don't have to necessarily go through as many dramatic life changes, because we're always kind of paying attention to the little shifts that want to happen in our lives, to like the little micro adjustments in our path versus these like, huge deviations that we need to kind of correct in whatever path that we're on.
Yeah. And so in there, you've started to talk about like how we can develop and our ability to work with synchronicity, to play with them. What are your ideas around that for people who want to start to actively be engaged with, the world of synchronicity, to start to change their experiences of their lives?
Yeah. So I think about it I look back at my life in Oregon, and it felt very much like I was confined to this lane, this path, this rut, and just kind of going through the motions of life and not really opening up to, like, I've done this a lot, like opening my hands and looking around and wondering what else is possible. And so I look at that phase of my life where I didn't acknowledge synchronicity, and it felt more in that part of my life. It felt like life was happening to me rather than like I was leading the ship, there's this give and take of leading the ship and also receiving and letting things flow where they want to go. So where I'm going with this is that we have all these opportunities every day to do something different than our usual. So for example, with your meeting Ricky, he did something out of like that maybe was not his default. Like maybe he didn't typically like to do this sort of thing, but he did it. And so saying yes when you would normally say no, and also maybe saying no when you would normally always say yes, like doing the opposite of your whatever is habitual for you. I feel like that can open us up to it. And then also, so I think I may have told this story, but we were living in Ecuador, and we were my husband specifically was feeling frustrated with the meat that was available at the grocery store. And he was not loving the situation there. We just had been there maybe like a week or so. And so I was kind of like, okay, what else is possible for us here? And so we had always gone left when we were going to the grocery store previously. But I got this nudge to go right. I'm like, hey, let's go right today. Let's go right and just see where that path takes us. And so we went right, and we went up the hill, and we turned right on a street, and it's just this residential street, cars parked along the sidewalks. And we crossed this suburban with these two gringa ladies, which that's an uncommon thing that we had not, experienced yet. And they had coolers of meat, like huge coolers of meat. John and I are walking by, and I'm like just looking at it, and I'm like, hey, we've got probably like 15 feet past. I'm like, they had meat in those coolers. We should probably turn around and go talk to them. We almost didn't. And so we go right back, and they're like, oh, we have a farm up in Cotacachi. It's like an hour and a half from here. And I had heard of Cotacachi, so it kind of stuck out at me. I didn't know anything about it, but I had heard about it. And we ended up buying like a huge grocery bag full of meat. Like we've got pickles, like all these like good quality. And it was like super affordable. And we're like, wow, I'm like, how often do you come here? We got their card. And so we turned around, we took the meat back home, and they literally, after we got the meat, they were gone. It was like this timing had to be perfect. And we went to take the meat home, and then we went to the grocery store. But then it had me looking at Cotacachi, because I had heard Cotacachi before. Then we had this experience with Cotacachi, like these women. And we were planning to move after a month of being there in Quito, Ecuador. So like, I think we should I started looking at Cotacachi. We ended up moving there, and it was one of the best experiences that we've had living in it for a short period of time. And so it was like going right instead of like listening to that nudge, kind of asking for something more, going right instead of left, and stopping to speak with someone else, right? Maybe, maybe you don't feel comfortable just talking to a stranger for whatever reason, or, and so it's those things out of your normal that puts those opportunities in front of you. And it's also, I feel like we can, when things pop out at us, it's like give them weight, right? Like say if you're just like looking at, you can practice with this. I feel you can look at, I'm doing this with my son. We're like reading this fact book every night, but it's these multiple choice questions, and then you guess, and then it tells you like information about that. So they're ones that and it's basically learning in backwards. It's not learning and then going and asking the question. It's asking the question and then reading about the answer. So it's a different way to learn. And so there's a lot of him, he's never heard of some of these things. And so I'm teaching him to like, which one is popping out at you, and to trust the things that pop out at you as, and just not second guessing them and trying it. Like, okay, that one sounds good. And so that's cultivating this like discernment and trusting this recognition that things can pop out to us that have more importance for us. So those are some things that I think we can do. We can also, I guess we said, ask the questions and see how things are going to come in. And then we can, I just like to laugh when something happens, like, because that's like an acknowledgement, and like makes it kind of fun and kind of like a game. And when things are games, we want to play it more. And whoever I'm playing this game with, like, I feel like they want to play it with me because I'm playing the game with them. And so, gamifying it.
Yeah, I love that. And I just add, I think, I said this at the start, like it's got to begin with an opening to the belief, and I think, I do that with my hands, kind of, if we disbelieve, we kind of cover our eyes. If we open ourselves to believe, like we can at least see our opportunities. And then, when we start to acknowledge, like you said, that kind of opens those blinders or like parameters or aperture even more for us to really see how much life is really kind of engaging with us in an energetic way, right? We are consciousness. Everything else is consciousness. I think as we play with that too, there's the intention that's spoken about a lot, is like, what is our intention? And we set that intention forth. And it's kind of like that example of, I want to buy a red car. And then you're holding that intention in you that, it's kind of like an energy. It's like a signal. It's kind of like, you're sending out a message. And so then you therefore start to notice red cars, right? Like, we can start to play with like I'm going to say internal system, but more so, what are we focused on? What are we thinking about? What are we, desiring? What are we wanting to know? Because I think that's the powerful thing. Like, do we want a confirmation? Because we have so many choices to make on any given day, and we don't have to feel like we're completely alone in that. Like, we can ask for a confirmation, and it's as simple as that. I'd like confirmation on this. Like you say, take your hands off that. But then exactly, be open to every single potential that could exist. That it might be like an animal coming in, and like, just do the quick Google search of, what do these animals, what's the spiritual meaning? Just skim the, things that come up, look for the words that stand out to you. Nothing, okay, dismiss that. Maybe that was nothing. But you start to cultivate a relationship, I think, with those things too. And so, there's a deeper meaning to them. It can be like just seeing a consistent set of numbers repeated over and over again. Again, I think that's really up to our own interpretation of what that means for us. It can be like exactly like some random ad popping up on your feed somewhere, or like you said, a video that just keeps kind of coming up. And I think the big thing, like you said, is not to dismiss it, because we're so easy to dismiss, oh, that's interesting, and then like carry on with our busy lives. So I think it's because our minds are so busy, practicing slowing that down, creating more awareness. And then when I say more awareness, like just more sort of peace within ourselves to be noticing. subtle things. And that's a practice, and your meditation practice can help us to be more, a little less noise in our minds. But yeah, it's a subtle attunement to things. And then when you see something, like you said, acknowledge it, because it kind of is almost like this feedback loop of like, I see it, I acknowledge it, and then it means something to me, and we see more. And you've really spoken to that through your experience as well. But last thing I'll just say exactly is that like everything is energy, and it is just this kind of like matching of energy in some ways, So if we put something out, like it is the law of physics or quantum reality or quantum physics that, it's a vibrational matches. We can create our reality in that way. That may be another topic for another day.
Yeah. What popped into my head as you're talking. So, I've used the analogy of social media and YouTube, and yes, there is an algorithm there. And I feel there's something more energetic at play as well. But using that analogy for all of reality, really, the algorithm is learning what we want to pay attention to. And so it's showing us more of what we put our attention on. And so you can think about it like our physical reality is doing the same thing. Like it's in our physical and our energetic reality. We are getting more of what we are asking for, what we're paying attention to. So it's happening, like there's an algorithm in the quantum that is shaping our reality. And so we get to choose what we pay attention to. And then we're going to see more of that, what we pay attention to. One more thing I'm going to say is that I think looking back, something I think that helped me with this cultivation was in the year after my mom passed away, I decided that I was going to dive into photography. And I won't go into the whole story, but I basically decided I'm going to learn this. I'm going to practice. I'm going to take my camera places. And so I feel like I was always looking at things, trying to look at things in different ways. And I was being very observant because I was cultivating this photography skill. And so I felt like I was in awe, like in that year of my life, I felt like I was in awe of like nature and just kind of life. I was just seeing like the beauty in things. And I think that helps us connect the dots of how, I'll say, beautiful it is, that how connected things are, and getting excited about the connections, relationships, how things are always working out for us. It's like when we're in that energy, I think more things come our way as well. And so, yeah, I would say going out in nature and just like really just kind of looking around with this like openness, like not really focusing on one thing, and just like the awe of like how everything coexists. Like nature is such a good example of the connectedness of life, reality, and just kind of absorb, like we can absorb that frequency of oneness, I think, through being in nature. And the more that we're in that frequency, the more we are going to be operating from this perspective, holding the belief that we are being guided, we are supported, things can come to us to help us. So that's another tip. Going out in nature, being open, kind of taking that put your phone away, take the ear plugs out and earbuds, and just like be and like embody and embrace the frequency of nature. Because nature is all synchronistic, right? In terms of everything kind of having its place and its time, and accepting it all. Like let's like surrender and acceptance in nature as well.
That's a really great tip. And so I'm going to invite anyone who's listening, both YouTube and also on our podcast platforms, to share with us your profound moments of synchronicity. We'd really love to hear them, speak them into existence. And if you've heard through the examples that we've shared here that's really sparked something for you in terms of noticing that actually you have been having these experiences, let us know in the comments. We'd really love to hear your stories. So thank you, Amanda, for this great conversation.
Thank you. Yeah. And if you found this video synchronistically, we really want to hear that as well.
Yes.
100%. Or episode.
Yes. All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We'll join you in the next episode.